Race is now at the center of the national conversation heading into the final weeks of the 2020 campaign for president. Over the course of these years, there has been a lot of controversy about the Black Lives Matter movement. There was a peak in the situation this summer after the murder of George Floyd. Biden has shown that he is all for the Black Lives Matter movement, but on the other hand, Trump wasn't showing much support. The motivation for Democrats' warm embrace of Black Lives Matter can't be simply that Black votes matter. The Democrats' platform has been full of sentiment for a long time. Biden still has a lot to prove to many Black and Latino voters, young folks, and those to the left of him, that he can be trusted on these issues, that he is worth braving a pandemic and weaving through voter suppression tactics to cast ballot for. As Biden said in reference to a Hindi poem, this is our moment to make hope and history rhyme. As we know, we have been dealing with the coronavirus since December, but it didn't really make a huge outbreak until March. The President of the United States downplayed it and made it seem like it wasn't really nothing to worry about while people were dying from left to right. However, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have a 7-point plan to beat COVID-19 and get our country back on track, which is, number one, fix Trump's testing and tracing fiasco to ensure all Americans have access to regular, reliable, and free testing. 2, fix personal protective equipment problems for good. 3, provide clear, consistent evidence based on national guidance for how communities should navigate the pandemic. 4, plan for the effective, equitable distribution of treatments and vaccines. 5, protect older Americans and others at high risk. 6, rebuild and expand the defenses that Trump has dismantled to prevent, predict, and mitigate pandemic threats, including those coming from China. And lastly, implement mask mandates nationwide by working with governors and mayors and by asking the American people to do what they do best, step up in a time of crisis.
Over the last 9 months of our lives, we have suffered this virus called corona. There has been millions of deaths all around the world. There has been cases where people have survived the virus. Overall, our 2020 has been all in quarantine. It has also been a huge pandemic. We are currently in order to wear masks everywhere we go, including going to school and wearing a mask for 8 hours. By wearing these masks, the number of cases have dropped and has helped us not spread the virus as much. In order to maintain the virus at a minimum, we must wash our hands and sanitize. With this virus, it has been harder to do things. It's been harder to adapt to the world around us, maintaining 6 feet apart and doing social distancing and so on. Trump downplayed COVID because he didn't want to alert people. He didn't want to worry people, but he didn't do much about it till it got worse. But then at the same time, he told us it would be gone by the time the warm weather came by, but that wasn't the case. The cases rise, people died, the numbers got higher, and that's when he stepped up and decided to close everything down and go on lockdown. And Biden's point of view, he said he would have done things differently. He would have shut everything down the moment the virus came out, and things would have been differently, as he said and stated. Along with this virus, pandemic, and quarantine, this summer there was a murder of George Floyd. He was murdered by police brutality. He went viral by the way he was killed. No person should be killed the way he was, and no one should have to go through what his family did. During this period of time, there was a protest for justice of George Floyd. They wanted to see justice on those police officers who shot and killed George Floyd because they assumed he was armed when he really wasn't. People shouldn't be treated the way they are because of color or their race. They should all be treated equally and fair and have the same rights as other people do as well. During this protest, they became riots because no one was listening to them and they wanted to be heard. And they believed violence was the key to being heard. Trump believed that the riots were uncalled for, that there was no point in them. As the riots got more violent and complicated, Trump sent out people to shoot these people at the riots with plastic balls. He thought he could stop them and take control, but that wasn't the case. After that case of George Floyd, there was more protests that came along with the Black Lives Matter movement.